We're still waiting for Mark to sort out the audio problem.
Yep.
Okay. I think I'm back with you, Janet. So just give me 30 more seconds.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. This is a public hearing of the Chatham Conservation Commission being held on Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020, in accordance with the provisions of the Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Wetlands Protection Act, and the Town of Chatham Wetlands Protection Bylaw, Chapter 272. It is being broadcast live on Channel 18 and recorded for the archives. Today's hearing is being conducted by a remote video conference pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency orders prohibiting the gathering of large groups of people. Every effort has been made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. The agenda and copies of all documents for review today have been posted on the town website. And a reminder that persons watching on Channel 18 who would like to participate in this meeting while it's in progress may do so by calling the phone number that's displayed on the screen. A quick note, I see that we have a number of participants with us today who are new to this platform, so you're very welcome this morning. And a couple things to keep in mind. Because of the constriction of the video feed, we need to keep people's cameras turned off unless and until it's time for them to speak. So representatives are encouraged to turn their cameras on when it's time to speak. Other participants, please keep them off, and also please keep yourself muted. It can be a lot of background noise that can interfere. And because I can't mute myself, you're going to be hearing the beep, beep, beep of a lot of construction equipment behind me, and apologies for that, but I can't change that. Also know that if people forget to mute themselves on the phone by hitting *6, Callie can do that manually from her end. So if you begin to speak and you're not being heard, she may have muted you. So use *6 to mute and *6 to unmute. So as we go through and consider each matter today, I'll be asking for questions and comments first from the commissioners and then from other participants on the call. Please indicate that you wish to ask a question or make a comment by unmuting yourself and stating you wish to speak, and then wait to be recognized. As we've been our practice lately, all commission votes today will be by roll call. And so that we have a record of the quorum of the commission attending today, I will now ask each commission member to indicate their presence on the call by stating present. Commissioner Kitts.
Present.
Commissioner Walls.
Present.
Commissioner Del Vecchio.
Present.
Commissioner Clark.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum today, so the hearing is open. We do not have any requests for continuances today, I believe, so we can move right to the first item on the agenda.
Okay, great. The first item on the agenda is a request for a one-year extension at 448 Old Harbor Road. Michael and Elizabeth Riley, SE 103065. Request for a one-year extension to install a pervious stone patio, dry laid walkway, construct a patio, remove lawn, and other landscape improvements. I recommend issuing this one-year extension to the Rileys. they've clearly outlined why they need the extension in their letter, and I recommend issuing it.
And this is the, do we know whether this is the second or the first request for an extension?
I think this is the second request for an extension.
Okay. Okay. Commissioners, any questions? Mr. Riley, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, just, yes, very briefly, want to thank you all for considering it. It's not as if we're doing nothing. We're doing a lot to get rid of the invasive species and some of the plantings that are on the allowed permit. It's just the construction part of the patio and all has been delayed with COVID, et cetera. So hopefully get it done this fall or next summer. We'll contact Callie when the construction begins.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hope it gets done soon. So is there a motion to approve the request for the extension?
Motion to approve the request for extension, 1-year extension. Bob Ross.
Is there a second?
Clark,
Vecchio,
second.
Okay. All right, Tom, you are on second duty today, so the first one to chime in.
No, I want to hand that honor to Bob, please.
Okay, Bob Delvecchio, you are on second duty then.
Okay, I welcome the welcome.
Okay, second. Roll call vote to approve the request for a 1-year extension. Commissioner Kitts?
Yes.
Rawls?
Aye.
Delvecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. It's approved. Thank you, Mr. Riley.
Thank you. Thanks for the commissioners, what you do. Thank
It's
you.
going.
Okay, the next item on the agenda are notices of intent. 86 Harborview Road, Mark J. and Andy Jenis, SC 103423, proposed demolition of existing dwelling, construction of new dwelling with new septic system tank, mitigation plantings at 86 Harborview Road, Assessors Map 8A, Parcel H3.
Hi, good morning. This is Stephanie Sequin from Ryder and Wilcox, and I'm representing Mark and Ann Jenis, and they are the owners. I believe Phil Cheney may also be here. So this property is at 86 Harborview Road. It's just under 19,000 square feet. It has views to the south of Harding's Beach and to the southeast of Stage Harbor. Just off the property to the south is a salt marsh and land subject to coastal storm flowage. And abutting the salt marsh is a pretty steep coastal bank with a pretty obvious break at the top of the bank. We've located the top of the bank and shown the 1,500-foot buffers, which cover a large portion of the property. The existing building was built in 1957. It's a 2-story, 4-bedroom with attached garage. The entire structure is located within the 50 to 100-foot buffer. There's an existing patio that extends partially into the 50-foot buffer. There's approximately 106 square feet of the patio is within the 50-foot buffer. The other hardscaping consists of a shell driveway and various stone walkways around the building. The septic system was upgraded in 2010. That's located out near the road, outside of the 100-foot buffer. And the established lawn surrounds the building. It extends very close to the top of the coastal bank, and there are several mature trees located within the yard area. We're proposing to remove the existing dwelling in its entirety, including all the hardscaping, and replace it with a new dwelling. More or less, the main part of the building is located in the same general area as the existing building. It will the new building will also be 2 stories, remain at 4-bedroom with an attached garage. But the way the building was laid out, the proposed garage is located to the north, and the reasoning for that is since the garage will be on a slab, we can get that new structure as close as 10 feet to the existing leaching system, whereas if it was a full basement, would have to hold a 20-foot setback. So we positioned the garage on the roadside so that we could maximize the separation from the proposed building to the top of the coastal bank. It's the positioning of the building. We held the minimum side yard setback on the west side, which is a 15-foot setback. We maintained a little bit more than the 15-foot minimum. It's 22 feet on the east side. And the reason for that was to allow the neighbor located on the other side of the road, who currently has a view along that easterly property line. So the Mr. and Mrs. Jenness were very careful to do what they could to maintain the view that the neighbor currently has. So that's the reason for the positioning and the layout there. We're also proposing to reconstruct a new pervious patio in a slightly pulled further away from the top of the coastal bank. In this new layout, only 58 square feet of the patio will be within the 50-foot buffer. So we're looking at a reduction in the square footage within the 50-foot no disturb zone. The proposed driveway will remain pervious. It is almost entirely outside of the 100-foot buffer. The existing leaching system will remain. We are going to replace the existing septic tank with a heavy-duty tank and then connect to the existing leaching system. I've provided the coverage calcs. We have a 48 square foot reduction in the square footage of the patio within the 0 to 50 foot buffer, and an increase of 515 square feet in the 50 to 100 foot buffer, for a net increase within your jurisdiction of 467 square feet. As mitigation for that, we are showing an area along the seaward edge of the existing lawn, 600 square feet of the existing lawn that will be restored with native plantings, and those are as shown on the plan prepared by Phil Cheney. So we're, going a little bit beyond the one-to-one mitigation that is required. Provided our typical construction.
Good morning, this is Phil
notes.
Cheney.
Hi, Phil.
There you go. Continue, Steph. I just want
Okay,
to.
I just have a little bit more. Our standard construction notes, we're showing the limit of work and specified that the fabric silk fence will be installed along the limit of work throughout construction and remain until the disturbed areas are restored. Gutters and downspouts to dry wells. The dry wells will be located between the 50 and 100 foot buffer. They will not be located within the 50 foot buffer. And otherwise, like I said, just our standard construction notes. This does require zoning board of appeals because of the undersized lot area. The building complies otherwise with setback and coverage and building height, but it is an undersized lot and therefore requires a special permit from the zoning board of appeals. And that hearing, I believe, is scheduled for tomorrow. So that's all I have to say. I think Phil is ready to describe the mitigation plantings if you'd like to hear about that now.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Good morning, Phil.
Good morning. Phil Cheney here, landscape designer. I developed a mitigation plan that you're seeing in front of you now, where we've added 600 square feet of native plantings. The existing coastal bank has some vegetation landward of it existing, and my goal was to make sure we had a minimum of 10 feet of vegetation from the coastal bank in all areas, and some areas are up to 20 feet. But we've got a good combination of durable, drought-resistant native species there that will stay fairly low. There are some existing pines on the southwest corner that I do not show in the plan. Those would not be affected. They would be remaining as they are now. There would be a one-rail fence along the edge of the mitigation just to define it and prevent any mowing of that area. Included in the application was a vista pruning request to keep that area from the coastal bank to the lawn pruned at a height of 3 to 4 feet for the future. I think that covers it.
Okay, thank you very much, Phil. All right, questions from commissioners?
Commissioner Clark has a question.
Yes, Tom, go ahead.
I'll address, I guess I address these to Stephanie. There, just in looking through all the paperwork and stuff, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Was there an assessment of the stability of whether or not the project will have any impact on the stability of the coastal bank?
I did include in the performance standards in the narrative. No work will occur on the coastal bank. All proposed excavation is greater than 50 feet from the top of the coastal bank. The existing grades are remaining within the 50-foot buffer, remaining unchanged. The roof runoff will be controlled through the installation of dry wells. Existing lawn adjacent to the top of the coastal bank will be removed and restored with native plants. And these measures should assure there is no adverse effect on the stability of the coastal bank. So that's in the performance standards in the narrative. You're welcome.
Okay, one other question. Did you submit any paperwork pursuant to policy 92.1 or -1 about determination of the top of the coastal bank? I didn't see any, but that doesn't mean you didn't submit it.
I did not prepare a cross section, but it's pretty obvious when you're out there. It rises very steeply. It's at greater than 4-to-1, and then there's a pretty definite break in the slope.
Okay, so the answer is no, but if I understand you correctly. Okay.
You're not missing anything.
Okay. Well, it happens, you know, especially in this age of COVID. You know, sometimes paperwork gets mixed up a little bit. One other question was, is there any reason to think that there'll be, that because the new dwelling will modify the flow of storm flowage in any way, shape, or form across the property?
Well, the roof currently has gutters and downspouts to dry wells, and the new structure will have all the roof area will be runoff from the roof will be recharged beneath the surface through gutters and downspouts to dry wells. So there won't be any, even though there's going to be an increase in square footage of building, there's not going to be an increase in runoff that would add to coastal storm flowage.
Okay, and are those, I see two circles on the display drawing that are kind of to the southwest of the building. Are those the dry wells? Are the location of the dry wells?
Those are existing trees that are remaining.
Oh, okay.
There's a 10-inch oak and a 12-inch oak. And those are seaward of the limit of work.
Okay, do you know where the dry wells are located?
They will be going, you know, basically off the corners of the buildings. They aren't shown on the plan, but we can provide the locations for the dry wells if you'd like to see them, but they will not be within the 50-foot buffer.
Okay, well, that was my concern. So if you could provide them at your convenience, that would certainly be appreciated.
Okay.
All right, Madam Chair, that's my questions.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Other questions from other commissioners?
Yeah, this is Bob Rawls. I have a few.
Okay, Bob.
When I'm looking at this plan, I guess the thing that strikes me is that the mitigation is a very thin strip. It's a very, I mean, it's the minimum required, granted that, but it's a strip that's situated between what I think is going to be the retained turf lawn, and then the coastal bank, which has, I want to ask about what percentage of that is invasives. So I'm just trying to figure out whether this VBS is going to do much for the resource area relative to the other problems there. And I'm really actually focusing on the lawn in the 0 to 50. If that is still turf lawn, it'll be receiving fertilizer, pesticides, et cetera. That's not much of a gain unless I'm misunderstanding something here. I guess this is for Stephanie.
That would be for Phil, I would think.
Or Phil, I mean, sorry.
Yeah. Phil, are you with us?
I'm with you. I'm thinking
Okay.
about the question there. Again, a lot of what is there is a pretty dense established growth above the coastal bank now. We are thickening that up some. Yes, a lot of what is there is exotic, but we certainly don't want to tear up the root systems at the top of the coastal bank without getting into a whole nother situation. So we're working within the guidelines for mitigation to create, I say, a minimum of 10 feet, which I think is a gain, and in some places we're getting up to 20 feet wide with some native plantings. We're defining it carefully with the rail fence, so it's not going to be encroached upon on there. So I think it meets the standards. And while it will be irrigated like it is now, I believe the standard condition with that, fertilizers and so forth would not be permitted in that area. That's a standard order of conditions, correct?
Yeah.
On the irrigation, the map I think shows irrigation on the not seaward, the landward side of the house. Is there irrigation on the lawn on the seaward side of the house?
There is, yes. Currently, the entire lawn is irrigated now.
Yeah.
On the landscape plan, I do show where it's, the irrigated lawn throughout.
I can say, yes, there is a note to the southeast of the patio on the mitigation plan, existing irrigated lawn to remain.
Oh yeah, I see it now. Okay. And of course, it would be delightful if we could make progress on the lawn. So you're saying that if it's not a fescue mix on the seaward side, correct?
I'm not sure what I'd call it. I think it's probably a total blend of turf grasses.
Yeah. And so, of course, it'd be delightful to make that something that doesn't need irrigation, doesn't need pesticides, doesn't need fertilizer. I'm not sure how we could get to that. I think of this as an opportunity whenever we have rebuilds like this to get away from that, especially in the 0 to 50, if you understand where I'm heading with this. Because that's so close to the coastal bank, which drains off into the water, that it's just be a shame if we can't do something to try to address that. That VBS really doesn't much to help that. Doesn't do much.
Bob, and to the chair, can I interject just for a second?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Kylie.
Would the commission be willing to entertain almost a swap where instead of the vegetated buffer to suggest maybe some changes to that seaward or wetland facing side of the lawn that would be, less prone to chemical treatment and, fertilizers and such.
Irrigation.
Instead of, an irrigation. So to remove the irrigation and make some improvements to the lawn that require less chemicals instead of that planted vegetated buffer strip.
I would to Kylie to second Bob's concern about the existing irrigated lawn. It also and the opportunity that's presented, because it strikes me that when through the kinds of operations that removing and demolishing the existing house and building a new one are going to bring to the entire area, even though I know the limit of work is outside, I think that the existing lawn is going to be terribly impacted anyway. I would be interested in something in an approach that dealt with that more than just putting a narrow strip across the top of the bank, which if the bank is as invaded as it certainly appears to be, that vegetative buffer strip may well just end up being destroyed by the invasives anyway.
So if this is Phil Cheney, if I may try to understand the suggestion that perhaps in lieu of the vegetative buffer strip, if we were to convert the rear lawn within the 50-foot zone to a fescue mix that won't require the same, fertilizer input and so forth, I might still recommend it be irrigated, that it may stay alive longer in the summer. It's such a hot and dry location. I think most grasses, even the most durable fescues, are going to go completely dormant in the summer there. But that would be an option. We could be reseeding it during the construction period. With the irrigation's not going to be running, there's going to be a considerable die-off anyways, perhaps. So perhaps it could be overseeded at that point with a fescue mix, so we have a more resilient lawn in the back that wouldn't require that. Did I understand that correctly, or?
Is it possible to pull out the in-ground irrigation in the 0 to 50?
I mean, the client would really prefer not to do that, because I think it's just going to be brown no matter what it is. My own fescue lawn in my house browned out in portions this summer with the dry stretch, and it's not in anywhere near as severe situation. So the irrigation would at least keep it green, but if we're dealing with fescues, it's not going to need the fertilizer and the pesticides that you might have with an established turf lawn.
May I add something?
Yes, Stephanie, go ahead.
Yeah. In this, the topography in the 0 to 50 is so very gently sloping. I know you're concerned about, runoff toward and over the coastal bank. But even, if there is irrigation in this portion of the lawn, it's not, it's basically going to stay on the lawn and not be running across the lawn and over the coastal bank.
Yes, there's no evidence that I could see of any erosion of water carrying over the bank, certainly.
Okay.
The percolation rate is great there. It's good sand underneath.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. We have always, we try to, when it's feasible, to stay away from any kind of in-ground irrigation within the no disturb zone. Would your clients be open to just using above ground irrigation to the extent it's needed through the drier season to keep it from going brown?
We can propose that to them and see how they feel about that.
Because I hear you about the percolation of the soil, and I'm not overly concerned about runoff coming down the top of the bank, a little bit, but at least an above ground system allows for some more control over the amount of water that's being discharged, and keeps us from having to create an exception to our general rule of not having in-ground in the NDZ.
I would add that the Cape Cod lawn is traditional in Cape Cod, so mine is brown. I think everyone has a brown lawn that I know.
Brown.
Commissioner Delvecchio here.
Yes, Bob, go ahead.
I believe that there are a couple of oaks in that area, in the backyard, in the back lawn, that are in need of water because it's such an exposed site. So if we did get rid of the underground system, I think those would need to be regularly watered, in the summer. So that's an issue. The other issue is there are a lot of invasives in that coastal bank, at the top there. And I propose that they remove some of those invasives in that area, just to cut and wipe and limit the invasives, especially if they're proposing to prune that location for a view. So, I mean, I like the idea of getting rid of the irrigation as well in the NDZ. However, I'm concerned about those 2 oaks. Plus, I'm concerned about the invasives in the coastal bank.
Okay.
Yes, if we, excuse me, the Phil Cheney here, if we did do the cut and swipe on the invasives up to the coastal bank, we would have to do some, excuse me, some replanting in that area as well, or we could simply move the proposed mitigation into that area and you know, overseed with the fescue lawn.
That seems like a better alternative to me, rather than just plant right next to the invasives. And maybe even provide some drip irrigation to those trees in the back lawn would be appropriate. And I'm assuming the trees by the front property line will also remain as well.
The ones on the west property line, I believe you're.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. There's no intention right now to remove those.
Right.
I mean, there's only one of them within the 100-foot now. So, but at this point, I don't think there's any plan to remove them.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. And as far as adding drip irrigation for the oaks, I don't think that'll serve as any useful replacement. The root system is quite extensive, and you can't lay drip lines over the lawn. Putting something around the base of a tree that mature is really of no real effect. It's the overall, the canopy, the root system there exceeds the size of the canopies. So yeah, and this is a case where the established trees, drip systems really don't help. Unless you're covering, you know, the entire area, the entire root system.
Yeah, I understand that. Just have a concern for those trees. It's just so exposed, you know, with the wind and so forth.
And that's where the lawn system will certainly help some.
Other questions from commissioners?
I just had one more thing. I think it was mentioned there are some pine trees on the coastal bank, you know, that they are not shown on the mitigation plan. It'd be nice to show them just for future reference that they were there, or whether they are there in the future or not.
Certainly,
and that they're not.
Definitely.
Yeah, they're not coming out.
Right.
Do you need them shown on the plan, or could a photograph?
No, just the plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Janet, I have one thing.
Yeah.
So there's going to be no tree removal for any of the trees that are currently on the property. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And Phil Cheney mentioned a vista pruning request. I apologize, Phil, if I've missed something, but I didn't see that on the planting plan.
I did not show it in the planting plan because it is the length of the bank there. It's not that wide a strip, and other than the pines in that corner, it's all just the low invasives now.
So you're not proposing any sort of like view corridor over the bank, because there are some straggling trees that are there. So I guess I'm just confused about what sort of vista pruning you're requesting.
Well, it's just to maintain the shrubs at, you know, from above the top of the coastal bank, you know, at a manageable height, the 3 to 4 feet.
Oh, okay.
You know,
yep.
That's all.
Okay.
Okay. And I think that's it. And oh, sorry, last question. The reason why the patio, this is for Stephanie, the reason why the patio extends a little bit into the no disturb zone, is because you're sort of constrained by the 10-foot setback from the septic system in the back of the lot. Is that correct? It seems so, it's like such a minimal in like hardscaping and the no disturb zone. My initial thought was, oh, well, maybe they can just shift it back. But it looks like you're constrained by the back, that 10-foot setback line.
We are, that's correct. We are as far seaward as we can go because of maintaining the existing leaching system and maintaining the setback from there. The existing leaching system is, as far from the resource area as it can go. So, and I explained in the alternatives analysis, they may have been able to get the same square footage of building that they were, that their goal was to reach by having a longer building going east to west and going, basically from sideline to sideline. May have been able to allow them to get the whole thing further from the bank, but they were really conscientious about trying to leave more of a corridor on that easterly sideline for the benefit of the neighbor across the street.
Oh, okay, so it's the neighbor across the street's view across the property that
That's right.
Okay, and that's why the patio, the thing couldn't have been shifted to the east and keep the patio further back.
Correct.
Okay, I got that. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Other participants? All right, so I think I'm trying to figure out where we're landing on this.
I was going to ask the same question.
We've had a lot of ideas. So let me see where the commissioner is coming out in terms of what they would like to see and be willing to approve. So the proposal to do away with, remove the proposed vegetated buffer strip along the top of the bank and instead remove the existing irrigated lawn and replace it with a seeded with a fescue mix that requires no in-ground irrigation, along with a cut and swipe removal of the invasives as they exist at the top of the coastal bank, and then planting, I guess, any bare areas that result from that with some native shrubs at the top there. Do I have that? Is that where we are?
Sounds right to me.
Yeah, that sounds right. Also, it was mentioned that dry wells and the pine trees should be all on the coastal bank. Both the dry wells and the pine trees should be added to the site plan.
Yep, got that.
Okay, and Stephanie, can you also, as you usually do, and I didn't notice that it wasn't in this one, you usually have a statement about the delineation of the bank in accordance with the policy, the DEP guidance. So if you could add that.
Okay.
So that's on the record that it was done that way.
I think Stephanie did do that, but Stephanie, you and I can coordinate offline if we need to do that.
Sure, it's in the narrative so that it's in.
So I'm looking at, I do have in the narrative, the topography at the flood zone is steeper than 4 to 1, therefore a coastal bank exists. The location of the top of the bank was determined by the points above the flood zone where the slope becomes less than 4 to 1.
Okay, then it is there, so I can cross that part off.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Tom.
I would just comment that policy 92-1 requires specific diagrams to be submitted on the determination of the top of the coastal bank. So I understand the practicality of a narrative, but that's not what the policy requires.
Well, I know that is a matter of practice. Unless there's an issue, unless the actual delineation becomes an important issue in terms of measuring where the 50 and the 100-foot lines are, we have not generally required the diagrams as part of the submission. I think that's something that perhaps the commission should take under advisement and figure whether we would require that in all cases or leave it as a statement. I don't know.
My concern is that without the analysis, it's hard to evaluate whether or not the determination is correct. And that's the only reason I'm in favor of taking it on its face as to what it says needs to be done in terms of analysis and submissions. But I understand why you would want to refer it to something to be considered to be added.
Yeah, I think we should think about that and decide, because I know as a matter of practice, we do not normally, if there's no issue with it. It slows the process down. Yes, Callie?
Janet, I just wanted to, Charles Curtin is on the meeting, and it looked like he was trying to speak. I had to mute him because there was a lot of background noise there and I couldn't hear anything. I just wanted to maybe give another shot to him if he wanted to speak, because he was lighting up when you asked for a public comment.
I saw the video come live.
Okay, I don't hear anything from him.
So let me go around to the commission members. Is what I just laid out sound like a proposal that can be approved with all the proper conditions in place? And if people have specific conditions they would want to put in there, this is the time to speak up. Bob, Rawls?
No, as you outlined it, I think that
Kelly, can you hear me? This is Mary.
I hear you,
Mary. We can all hear you. You're on live TV.
If you don't have, or you can't hear Mr. Curtin, there is a comment letter that they sent in. I scanned it to you last night.
Unfortunately, I didn't get it. Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah, I do.
Can you read it to the chair? Is that okay if Mary reads it?
Fine, go ahead, Mary. Why don't you read that letter?
Yeah, it's lengthy, and it's addressed to the Conservation Commission members, and I received it July 21st. My family, consisting of my wife, Mary, and 2 young children, Charles and Eleanor, have grave concerns regarding the proposed development of 144 Chat Harbor.
That's 144 Harbor. That's not this one.
Okay. Sorry, I was misreading it.
I saw the name Curtin. I thought that was a Chat Harbor name, but whatever. Okay, hold on to that until we get to Harbor in a little while.
Okay.
Thanks.
My apologies.
No problem. Okay, back to, so Bob Rawls, you said you basically the proposal that we've outlined is something that you could approve.
Yes.
Under our typical special and general conditions.
Yes.
Okay. Bob Delvecchio, what do you think?
Yes. Yeah, I think those are all nice improvements, for the environment, for the resource area.
Agreed. Joe?
Agreed.
Tom, where do you come out on this?
Delvecchio's happy, I'm happy.
We all say that. And I do agree with Bob that it's overall, when you look at it, it's an improvement for the resource area over what is currently there. So my idea would be to take this, assuming Stephanie, you do the couple of changes to the plan, we can continue this to the work session on August 5th for the order of conditions.
That works for me. Yes, that would be great.
So okay. it would be the changes that were outlined, which also include some changes to the planting plan. So Phil, is that okay with you as well?
Yes, that's okay with me.
Okay. Do we have then a motion to continue this to the August 5th work session?
Motion to continue to August 5th work session. Bob Rawls.
Thank you. Second?
Delvecchio, second.
Thank you. Roll call to continue to the August 5th work session. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Delvecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. It's continued August 5th for the work session for the order of conditions. Thanks, Stephanie, and
So that means that
yeah,
everything is required to be submitted by July 29th. Is that?
July 29th. Okay, great.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good day.
Good day.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is 366 Sea Pine Road. Cove Point LLC is the owner. Nicholas Lackalade, officer, is the applicant. SC 103422. Proposed float changes to helical anchors and Hazlet system at 366 Sea Pine Road, assessors map 13K, parcel HC 24. I know that Charlie Agro and Don Monroe are planning to call. Don, are you here?
Callie, it's Don. Yes,
Oh,
I got done with my on-site, so I am here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All
So
right.
it's simply that Mr. Lackalade, through years of watching his neighbor with a Hazlet system, not having to install piles every year for his float, he wants to convert over to the Hazlet system so that he doesn't have to have a contractor come in and jet the float piles in every year. So we see that as an improvement, and the helical anchors would be installed by a diver. They would be installed once, and that would be the end of it, similar to the Chatham Bars Inn float system, so that all they would have to do is send the diver out to hook the Hazlet system onto the helical anchor so that the float, is in the same position it's always been in. So we're not making any more changes to the whole system than that.
So, Don, can you, just for the benefit, of me, and I suspect others too, can you briefly describe the current process that they go through to install and uninstall the float each season, and how the impact that has on the surrounding area?
So typically they have a company like Cape Cod Docks or a company similar to that come with a small floating barge with the float itself in tow. Then they get that somewhat situated where it's supposed to be. Then they have the piles with them on the same machine, and they'll usually jet those wooden piles in to hold the float in place. So they have to do that every spring when they do the install, and then they have to remove them so they're not out in the open water during the off season. So there's a removal process too. I don't believe they have to jet to remove, but they may have to. So every time they jet to put the piles in, they're upsetting land under ocean and land containing shellfish. Whereas with the Hazlet system, they install the helical anchors that have like a little eye bolt thing on the top that's relatively substantial. It's like 2 square inches, but that's what everything hooks on. That's what the rubber Hazlet rubber, we call them large rubber bands, but those are what get hooked onto that helical anchor. But there's no disturbance to the bottom. The diver just dives down and hooks on. So there's only one disturbance, the initial install, and then they still come out, get the float, and float the float off site, but they don't have to pull piles and they don't have to install piles. So it's the jetting that Nicholas is more concerned about. He'd like to alleviate the jetting as well as the cost associated with that.
Right. And do I understand the design that once the metal screws, the anchors, are installed, the piece that will eventually hook onto what you refer to as the rubber band is held aloft by a small float device that keeps it from laying on the sea floor?
Correct. That's why DMF likes them, because it alleviates the scouring of like a chain that's typically used on a mooring that can, on a low tide, scrape the bottom and disturb the bottom as far as shellfish and vegetation.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a question about looking at the plan with the photograph. Do you know whether eelgrass beds are mapped in the location of the float? Because it looks like there might be darker.
There are no. We did the hydrographic survey, and Charlie from my office will do a sounding to determine if there's eelgrass. There isn't any eelgrass at all in that location. There may be some other subaquatic vegetation, but it's definitely not eelgrass. But it's still, obviously anything we do to keep subaquatic vegetation intact is a benefit.
Okay.
Don, the issue, I think, just to interject, the NOI in the narrative, you guys stated that there is eelgrass there. Can you just revisit that then?
Oh boy. Shoot. I wish Charlie was on the line. Okay, yeah, I will. If there is, darn it. Yeah, I'll talk to Charlie about that because.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Either way, though, Callie, if there is, then this is a benefit for sure.
Yeah, I'm not a decision maker, but I do completely agree with you. And I think Ted and Renee agrees that this is a benefit over what's there now. It's just,
yep.
If there is eelgrass there, it's an opportunity to avoid where it is potentially. And if there is eelgrass there, it's probably a good idea to put it on where it's located on the actual site plan.
Right.
Yep, well, Charlie certainly can update the plan to show the specific location so that when we place the helical anchors, we're not in it.
Okay, great. Other questions from commissioners?
Well, just to follow up on the eelgrass, Bob Rawls, if there is eelgrass nearby, then I guess you need to have other precautions in place. I don't know whether something like silt and curtains is called for. I don't know whether time of year is called for and so forth. So it sort of depends on whether there is any around.
Yeah, good point. The installation of the helical anchors is pretty benign. So it wouldn't be wise to try to use silt curtains because it doesn't generate any silt when they screw them into the ground. It'd be more like if they find a patch of eelgrass, then they should be instructed to maybe, I'm sure it's patchy at best, so that they could find spaces where they can install a helical anchor so that if it's, in point A, they can offset it a foot, and then we just have them give us the coordinates of the location, then we can stick that on the plan. So it would be more, I would say a time of year restriction would be better so that the install of the actual helical anchors is done in the fall or the winter, which is not a problem. And then the hooking on is just a diver going down. So there'd be no adverse effect to the eelgrass during the hooking of the Hazlitt anchors onto the helical anchor.
Okay. Just one more question. Those chains extend quite a distance, and I'm not sure exactly how far horizontally in the water. I assume that there's no typical boating hazard from having those there?
Right. There isn't, because as much as it looks like there may be interference with prop wash, until you get very close to the float, the water elevation to the actual cording that you're seeing attached from one point to the float point, there is a somewhat of a sag, even though they are elastic. And they're almost 2 to 2.5 feet or even more as you move away from the float. And there's never been an issue with the Chatham bars in floats, which are similar, and the neighbors' floats to Mr. Lackalade's never been a boating issue. So they're an accepted means of trying to address the adverse effect of regular piles and jetting them in, and then also mooring chains that drag on the bottom. So the reason they're that long is because the tidal fluctuation there is such that you require that length in order to make sure that you have the right elasticity all the time during each moment of the tide. So there's tension, there's tension there.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Other questions from commissioners? Callie, do you have questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I just have just a few more for Don. Don, do you have to do like a minor modification to your license for this?
Yes. We've
Okay.
already talked to Brendan up at DEP, and he's, waiting for the order to be issued and looking for a plan from us that shows the locations of the Hazlet, but it is a minor mod.
Can we just require, proof of that minor mod app for,
Yep.
or documentation in the order?
Yes.
Okay. You have to go before any other town boards for this?
We submitted all of these things to, the regular chain. So I know Ted has seen it and Renee has seen it. So
Yep.
we weren't asked to come in front of them. Typically they'll say, well, you better come to Shellfish for this one. So we did not file to go in front of them. So
no, they've said that they're fine, that they see, like I said before, that they see a net benefit of the project. I was just curious if, other than Ted and Renee, if there are any other filings.
Nope. We don't have to go to zoning because it's not a structure. We're not changing anything on the shoreline related to the coastal banks, stairway or anything. So it's really just going through you. And then I'm glad that they were able to chime in, to Renee and Ted, about the resource areas. So I think that's all we need to do, Callie.
Okay. And then the last question, Don, for you is there an issue with this particular system of the float kind of bottoming out?
No, it won't bottom out, Callie, because there's nothing on the license or the Army Corps permit currently that talks about float stops needed in this location. So we don't anticipate that it'll bottom out. I mean, that whole inlet could be devoid of water and then it would bottom out, but that would be the case for every other float that's out there. So I think there's enough water during all tides that the float will still remain afloat. And then because of the design of the location of the helical anchors, there'll always be tension no matter what tide is there, so that the float stays right where it is currently without having to have the solid piles, surrounding it. It's a design that has worked for many other float applications, and the float stays right where it's supposed to with the ramp on it, but you don't see any piles holding it. It's pretty unique.
Yeah, no, it seemed really neat and definitely seems to work. Okay, well, we have some standard language in our order about bottoming out for floats that we'll just include also for this one, kind of like it shall not bottom out, essentially, and if it does bottom out for a kind of prolonged period of time, that it be removed, like seasonally.
Okay. It's coming out seasonally anyway still, so
yeah,
it's not changing that fact. So the only thing that stays in now permanently is the anchors, but they're almost flush to the bottom, and then they locate them by GPS and a metal detector underwater.
Okay.
That's it for me.
All right, so I think where we're ending up here, Don, is that you guys will go back, you and Charlie, and clarify the eelgrass situation, whether there is any there. If so, add the location as you can tell it to the plan. We'll also add a provision in the order that if any other eelgrass is located during the, it will be added and put on the plan as well, so everybody knows exactly where it is.
Okay.
Anything else from anybody?
And there will be a time of year if there is eelgrass.
Yep, there'll be a time of year restriction so that the installation of the anchors can only be done in the fall or winter. Yep, we'll add the bottoming out. We'll add the eelgrass protection provisions if there is. Anything else? All right, then, is there a motion to take this to the work session on August 5th for an order of conditions?
Motion to go to the August 5th work session for orders of conditions.
Okay, is there a second?
Excellent.
Delvecchio, second.
All right, roll call to continue to August 5th for the order of conditions. Commissioner Kitts.
Aye.
Rawls.
Aye.
Delvecchio.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
I vote aye, so unanimous vote to take it to August 5th and so you'll
Dawn-
get in by, what was the date, Callie? The
So Don, you'll get us
29th.
the Hillgrass information by next Wednesday, July 29th.
Yes. Yep, you bet.
Thank you. We'll look forward.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, the next item on the agenda,
Can we just, I just like to throw in a proposal for a slight agenda change. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I'm looking at it, we have 159 Sea Pine coming up. And I think David and Bill are here. Since this is a review of the revised materials and might be dealt with kind of quickly, I would hope and think. Would anybody object if we moved it up in front of Chat Harbor so that we're not holding those folks up while we deal with that?
Sounds good.
I don't normally do this, but I actually, for a number of reasons, I had it mixed up on my sheet, so I have it coming up next anyway.
Sounds good.
All right, David and Bill, are you guys here and ready to?
Yep, we're very much in favor of shifting position on the agenda.
I figured I'd save your clients a buck or two by getting you guys out of here early. So.
Thank you very much.
All right, take it away then. I'm just, let me just check and make sure that nobody from the Chat Harbor group objects to what I think will be a fairly quick interruption.
No objection.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
All right,
Kelly,
Chair and members, Bill Riley on behalf of
wait.
David Hall.
Bill, Callie has to read it first. Let me just, go ahead, Callie.
You read it last week.
Yeah, well, we had to read it today.
159 Sea Pine Road, David Hall, Hanover Company applicant, Diane Denby owner, SC 103416, proposed demolition of existing dwelling, construction of new dwelling at 159 Sea Pine Road, assessors map 11K, HC 13.
Okay, Madam Chair, Bill Riley on behalf of David and Meredith Hall. David Clark is on the line also, and it's really his show today, so take it away, Dave.
Okay, David Clark here. So in response to the Commission's questions and comments, we decided to make a significant change to the project. Basically what we did was we centered the proposed dwelling on the property. The benefit of that, as you'll see on the site plan, is that by moving it to the east, the driveway comes with it, and we're no longer proposing a retaining wall on the west side of the property. There is a significant patch of bayberry on that side, which will now not be disturbed at all. And so that really didn't change the site coverage numbers all that much. So those are pretty much the same. Other things we did to the plan is we clarified the driveway as to what's going to happen to that, and we show that it's to be removed almost in its entirety and replaced with a permeable surface. The only exception to that is out at the street. We are still proposing either an asphalt surface or a granite cobble surface, so that there's a durable surface there coming and going onto the street. Other questions the Commission had is they want us to define the view corridor that was proposed, and so that is now on the plan. Some slight changes on the water side. Because we slid the house over, we don't really have a clear connection between the terrace and the stairs over the bank. So right now there is a timber boardwalk there that needs a little bit of work. So we're going to remove that and replace it with a pervious gravel or shell pathway from the terrace to the stairs. The Commission also had questions regarding stormwater. I believe that the depression in the front yard is a great place to send all the stormwater from the driveway and the entire house. So what we would propose is to have gutters and downspouts leading to that low area. That area would, you know, in a 25-year storm event, would probably see a couple of feet of water for up to about 72 hours, more or less, till it dissipates through the ground. It doesn't impact any abutters, and then we felt that was better than trying to provide some subsurface infiltration. On the water side, I've left it open for discussion with the commission as to what to do with runoff from the terrace. It will be a dry laid terrace. Any runoff that the gravel grout or sand grout couldn't handle could either be directed to a subsurface drain, or this would be a good opportunity since Blue Flax is proposing an extensive restoration from the top of the revetment to the house. We could grade that in such a way as to provide approximately 300 cubic feet or 350 cubic feet of storage. Given the width of the property being 150 feet, it really will be unnoticeable, the depression. It only needs to be 6 inches deep, a few feet wide, will provide all the storage we need for a 25-year storm event. And then finally, Commissioner Clark asked about the revetment and the beach. I did provide some pictures. I don't feel that the material that's on the beach is coming from the revetment. You look back to the left and the right, we've got a almost identical situation with the other revetments in this neighborhood. There is quite a bare spot in between patches of salt marsh, which I imagine the owners over the decades have used it as a landing spot from a mooring out in the pond. But I don't feel that the material is coming from the revetment. Obviously, there was some issues with the revetment a few years ago, and I think it was after those March back-to-back storms, probably 5 years ago or so, where all the revetments in this area really got nailed because we had those two very significant northeast storms impact this area. The vegetation's all grown back. There are a couple of stones that have slumped a little bit, but overall, I think the revetment is fairly sound. I think one of the reasons there was a notice of intent to replace it was an opportune time to do it, in that the vegetation was damaged significantly after those storms. There was some stones that were loose, and it was a good time to do it. Why the owner didn't move forward with it, I don't have an answer for that. But at this point, I think it was a reaction to the severe storms, and it might need to be replaced in the future. But right now, I think it's serving its purpose. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions from commissioners?
And I think we have an updated planting plan too from.
Yes, is Emma?
This is Emma with Blue Flax Design. I can review the note changes. We made a couple of minor note changes as requested. We also noted the view corridor on our plan. We noted the existing native vegetation along the east and west property lines. And we made a note that the lawn path around the patio terrace will be established using a fescue mix and temporary irrigation. And then once it's established, the irrigation will be removed. And there was a very minor change in layout to our mitigation planting area. The mitigation area size has remained the same, but the layout shifted to accommodate the new house location. So that was very minor.
Okay. Thank you, Emma. Bob, you have questions about these changes?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Other questions on either the revised plan or the planting plan?
Commissioner Clark.
Yes, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure David and I will disagree, but the other day I was crawling around on top of the revetment, and actually you can see some fairly large areas where the coastal bank there has broken off and slumped behind the revetment. And considering that the soils that are eroding are of the same nature as the sands in front of the revetment, I think that's clearly the source. But I do agree with David, if I understood his comment correctly. This is something that's going on along the entire length of this coastal bank. That is everything. If you just look at all the neighboring properties and stuff, you begin to see the exact same things. That is where there's sand and cobbles moving out from under the revetment and in various and sundry places smothering the salt marsh in front of the particular location. That's the end of my comments.
Okay. Thank you. Do I take it, Emma, that to follow up on Tom's comment, that to the extent that there's the scarping along the top of the bank, where the sand is being pulled down and out or whatever, but there is a scarp happening, that this planting plan will address that and stabilize it?
That's correct. Yes, this is Emma. The plan proposes to establish a stable angle, and then we'll blanket it with the erosion control blanket, and then it'll be seeded and planted out with native shrubs. So that will absolutely stabilize what's happening. And I believe the escarpment above, David can speak to this, but I believe the escarpment above the revetment is due to the floodplain contour being above the top of the revetment. But David, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, Emma's correct. When the revetment was built, the floodplain, I believe, was elevation 9 at that point in time, back in the 80s, or actually earlier than that. So there was no reason to have it higher. Since the revetment was built, I think there's been 3 map revisions. In 98, I think it went up to elevation 10, and then most recently, obviously, to elevation 12. So right now, the top of the revetment is elevation 8, more or less, on the 1988 datum. So it takes quite a significant storm to create a situation where we've got scouring of the bank. So I think the other benefit of the Blue Flax design is that this all can be stabilized to the top of the stone, and hopefully kick that can down the road as far as replacing the revetment.
Okay, thank you, David. Other questions from commissioners? Callie?
I don't have anything.
All right. I think that I'll just say that I get that this is an unusual situation in the location of this dwelling on this lot. And I believe the applicants have done everything that you could possibly do to move it out of the 50-foot no disturb zone. But you're constrained by the depression in the front of the house. But I think that the mitigation and the changes compensate for that. And I think that it would probably qualify and be approvable. So the last thing I would want to make sure I touch on, David, is to go back to the comment you made about the angle of the terrace and the second alternative you laid out for what to do about the stormwater runoff from the terrace, and that it would feed into the mitigation area by creating a storage zone. Is that what?
Yes, correct. Yeah, so it doesn't, because it's only 350 cubic feet of runoff, and like I said, the property is 150 feet wide. It's just a small depression that needs to be graded into the area to create that storage area. Or the other option is to put in a couple of 4-foot diameter dry wells with a couple of feet of stone and put a trench drain in the terrace and pipe it to that. So they both accomplish the same thing from a stormwater management point of view. The benefit of the depression is that you get nutrient uptake by the plants.
Right.
This is Emma Votor. I also would just mention I'd recommend locating that off to the sides. Obviously, we don't have a lot of room along the top of the bank, but we do have room to accommodate that kind of grading off to the east side of the mitigation area, and then there is room on the west side. So it could be done and incorporated into our mitigation planting.
Would that, in your opinion, Emma, be an improvement?
I think that the nutrient uptake, the runoff being filtered by the soil and the plant roots is a benefit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And what would we need to do to the plan to add that particular feature?
I could simply add a spot grade on the plan. It's very minor grading, so I think all we would need is a couple of spot grades.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, Bill Riley, so that's something we'll work out between Emma and Dave Clark and get the information to Callie.
Yep. And I'll say the same question. Is that doable by next Wednesday, July 29th?
This is Emma.
I would say yes, but I'm not actually doing the work, so.
This is Emma Votor. Yes, that's doable on our end.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I can get it done too, David Clark.
Okay. So with that, I would propose that we treat this one the same as before and continue this to the August 5th work session for the order of conditions.
Bob Rawls move to the August 5th work session for OOC.
Okay.
I'll Vecchio second.
Thank you. Roll call vote to continue to August 5th work session for the order of conditions. Commissioner Kitts.
Aye.
Commissioner Walls.
Aye.
Commissioner Del Vecchio.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We'll take this to August 5th.
Thank you.
Work session. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, going back up to 144 Chat Harbor.
Yep.
Okay. 144 Chat Harbor Lane and associated easements over 130 Chat Harbor Lane. Michael and Lori McKenna are the applicants. Algene Nominee Trust, Eugene Farber and Harvey Ross, trustees, are the owners of 144. SC 103415, reopening for re-advertisement for the proposed improvements, the associated easement over 130 Chat Harbor Lane, and proposed raising of an existing structure, restoration of a coastal bank, and property redevelopment at 144 Chat Harbor Lane. Assessors map 5B, parcels 10A is 130 and 10 is 144.
Okay, thank you. Thad, before you start, I just want to make a statement again, just to welcome all the folks who have turned out for today's hearing, and to let them know that here's how the process is going to go today. The applicant's presentation will go first through their representatives, followed by questions from commissioners to clarify any matters that are not clear. We will then have comments from the neighbors. I understand that at least most of the neighbors are represented by counsel who is here today. We have received a number of comment letters from folks in the area. I want them to know that they are part of the record. They have been given to all the commissioners. We've all had a chance to read them. And so in the interest of keeping things moving along today, I believe that Mr. Reed is going to read selectively from them to get the main points across. And if I'm misspeaking, Mr. Reed, please jump in and tell me I'm wrong about that. And then we will hear from the neighbors to the extent that they want to speak. Now, because this is a large and complicated application, it's going to take at least 2 hearings to go through it. The commission will be asking for an on-site visit with the representatives of the applicants to clarify some matters that we would need to see on the ground. So to you folks, there is today, and there will also be a subsequent hearing at least. So if we don't get to individual comments today, I apologize, but there will be opportunity for you all to be heard. We will not close it until everybody has had an opportunity to speak.
Jen?
Yep.
The only one that I haven't received that's not in that original list that I sent to Mr. Reed is Charles Curtin. I also did not see the email from Mary. I don't have it. I just checked it. So that's just one of the ones that hasn't been passed to the commission as of yet.
Okay, and they will be today.
Yep.
Okay. And I'll leave it to Mr. Reed as to whether or not he wants them actually read into the record today or the next hearing. So with that, I'll turn it over to the representatives of the applicant.
Good morning. For the record, Thad Aldridge, East Southeast. If I may share my screen, I think I can go through things a little bit easier. And there we are.
Thad, just one quick thing while you're doing that. Is there, on my screen, there's so many windows open on your screen, it's hard to, the picture is very small. Is it possible to just blow it up a little bit?
Okay, a little much.
My screen just shows the plane. I'm not seeing.
That's fine. The way you have it now is fine.
That's fine.
Excellent. Okay, so we were before you. I was with the other bill. Back in 2016, we were attempting to construct a very minor addition to the existing home, and the commission sent us back saying that it would be more appropriate to construct in the middle of the property. The property owners the current owners put the property on the market, and now Michael and Lori McKenna are looking to purchase it and construct a home in accordance with the guidance given by the commission. Just to review the property, it is one of, if not the largest residential property in the vicinity, but it is also mostly wet. We're surrounded by salt marsh and other resource areas. Usually I start from the water side, but that's any side in this case. From Chat Harbor Road, we get right into salt marsh that wraps right around the property. Towards the south, we have 2 isolated wetlands. Those were redelineated and sheets were resubmitted. They did not change, with the exception the wetland near the dune has had more sand infiltrating into it or overwashing into it. There was a question if the isolated wetland to the west that's on the 130 property is in fact a vernal pool. That wetland is subject to tidal action, so it can't hold water for very long. When the tide goes out, it's fairly dry. So on the east side of the property, we have dune, beach, and then it goes into the tidal flats, land under the ocean. On the western side of the property where we have development, there's a 1972 house with a 1980 revetment or seawall. There's a revetment that's been installed subsequent in front of that and around it. There's a coastal bank, and then you get into the tidal flats and land under the ocean. The proposal, we can get into floodplain as well because I did show that. We have 2 lobes of upland here. There's close to 7,000 square feet out by the water, and there's 14,000 square feet further landward. So getting into the proposal, we're able to keep most of the activity outside the 100-foot buffer. This is also outside of the floodplain. The driveway itself has to cross through the buffers because the end of Chat Harbor Road is actually over the culvert that's connecting the wetland. We do have a proposed path to the beach, but that's allowed under the regulations. With this, we're proposing to remove the existing structure and revegetate the coastal bank and the back of the coastal bank, bringing that back into native. We're also proposing to leave the dirt driveway that exists and use a pathway, kind of widen it out, and that's for future nourishment projects. We're well aware that there are concerns that all of Nantucket Sound is having difficulty with sand. That's based, it's a problem here, but even more so that problem comes because very little sand can make it down in front of Forest Beach, Red River, Saquatucket Bluffs, and the biggest culprit of all would be the Witchmere Jetty. This has been filling for years. It's 20 years out before this is filled and before we'll start seeing a measurable amount of sand coming down into our systems. As mentioned, we have a fairly extensive planting plan. We have the advantage that there's some canopy loss on the east side of the property that we're going to restore. We do have a view corridor that's proposed, and I understand that the commission wants to see it now, but also see it later. We're certainly willing to work with the commission on that. There's concern over the culvert, and that's rightfully so. It's a 12-inch vitrified clay pipe that is not on our client's property. That extends from under the road layout, underneath the road, and goes out to the salt marsh. That's on George Metter's property and 130 Chat Harbor Road, and also a little bit into the Salt Marsh Corporation to the west. As mentioned, pretty much everything is outside of that 100. We have some lawn that gets into the 100. It's to keep trees away from the building. But the building itself, outside the 100, pool, parking area, most of the driveway, septic system. We have gutters and downspouts leading to dry wells to take care of stormwater from the roof runoff. And with that, I think we should open up to questions.
All right. Thank you, Thad. Before I open up to questions, I'm just going to reiterate that we are asking to schedule an on-site visit with all of us, because some of these questions are best answered standing in the area. So with that, I'll open up to commissioners for questions with respect to the materials that have been submitted, and we'll try to hold on stuff that can be best answered during and subsequent to an on-site. So, who wants to jump in first? There are lots of things to talk about. Bob?
Yeah, I guess Bob Rawls, I'll start. Obviously, there have been many concerns raised by the many adjoining neighbors, and a lot of those were addressed by the Woods Hole report. And there were about 7 or so key recommendations from those. I think Thad, you did address them to some degree. I do wonder whether or not how will we know? I guess 2 key questions for me overall. What will be the impact of this development on the marsh? Obviously, actually 3 questions, and then the second one, of course, is the culvert, and I don't know if that's totally within our jurisdiction, but it's obviously a key concern. And the third for me is the fact that you have this revetment that was protecting a house is going to be removed. And I don't know what that means in terms of whether the revetment can stay, should stay. What would happen if it were removed? You mentioned at some point that the revetment is partially owned by, I guess, 130. I can't quite tell on the maps. It's not entirely clear to me where that dividing line is. Perhaps you could, when you respond, you could address that. So those are the areas of concern to me. The overall impact on the marsh. How do we know? How can we reasonably be sure that we're not going to negatively impact the marsh? And what do we do about the culvert? And what do we do about the revetment?
Would you like me to answer as we go, or wait all at once?
It's up to the chair.
Well, go ahead, Thad, take those 3 and start there.
So the culvert, we are placing a steel plate or proposing to place a steel plate over the culvert for the heavy vehicle traffic. There is a chance that that culvert will break, in which case there would be an emergency. They would block off each end, dig it up, and put in a newer culvert. There were concerns raised by neighbors about tidal flow into the salt marsh. If we were to go out, obtain the permission from the owners of where the culvert passes, and actually install a culvert, it would likely increase tidal flow within the salt marsh, and those folks would be even more wet. The impact of the development on the salt marsh, we're 100 feet away from it. We have naturalized areas between the property, between the development and the salt marsh, with the exception of the driveway. And again, we can't get around that. We are proposing a stone or shell driveway, something that's pervious, and doing everything that we can. As far as the revetment, the boundary line is right down the middle of the stairs. So when you go out there and you get to in between the 2 houses at 130 and 144, everything to the east of the stairs could be removed. Everything to the west of the stairs would remain as part of 130. The removal would result in 10,000, 11,000 cubic yards of material. That would include organics, it would include some loams, sandy loams, and there would be sand underneath there. That would enter into a system that could use 10,000 cubic yards of material and send it right down to Monomoy. The result of that would be 130 would start to rebuild a revetment along the property line, and we would be in the same situation that we're in today, just with a minor amount of sand added into the beach system. From there, we would continue to see erosion back into the property that's being developed, or the area of the property that's being developed. So I'm not sure if it would actually benefit overall by removing that revetment. And I did note in my response that that revetment holds the beach to the west, that there's common easements. It was the subject of a land court case back in the 80s and 90s. And the community or neighborhood uses that beach to the west. Without the revetment, that beach to the west would be in peril.
Now, just one follow-up, since we're talking about the revetment, is there, to your knowledge, any obligation to remove the revetment if the house were no longer being there to be protected by it?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't believe the Chapter 91 license for it stated anything of the sort.
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is Bill Riley. I represent the owners of the property.
Yes.
And I can tell you that it's a permitted structure. It's going to remain. It's the only thing that protects the existence of that property. And so I can tell you there's no intention to remove it. In fact, if anybody tried to remove it or have it removed, we would contest it very vigorously.
So you're saying that the entire length of the revetment seawall protects the existing structure at 130? Is that, do I understand?
It's the existence of our lot at 144.
Okay.
So if the revetment stopped at the property line, you'd have to, first of all, you'd have to construct a return. You couldn't just have it end there. So you have to construct a return. And, you know, as Thad indicated, aside from the fact that, you know, you're now exposing a new, somewhat limited area to erosion, you're also destroying the value of the property behind it. So that's
okay. I hear you. I think what Bob was asking, and it's an interesting question, is at least under the Wetlands Protection Act, since revetments are permitted to protect buildings pre-78, what happens? It doesn't say anything about protecting it. Just as a matter of is there an obligation to remove a revetment when the building that was the basis for the construction of it in the first place is no longer there? That's, I think, all he was asking. I understand it's a very mixed question about whether it should go, but this is just whether there is an obligation for it to go.
Well, no, I think the real analysis here, which should be considered, is the fact that the existing structure is simply being, in a manner of speaking, simply being relocated further away from the beach in an area that is makes more sense from a conservation bylaw point of view, and so the fact that it's being moved further landward, would not justify, in my opinion anyway, the removal of the revetment and the wall.
Bob, does that answer your question?
Well, it's that helps to address it, but I think it would be good to be sure. I don't know exactly how we would be sure about that. It would surprise me that that there would be an obligation to remove it, but nevertheless, somehow, some way, I think we ought to get some definitive statement on that. I'm not sure if this has been done before.
Okay. Any other questions at the moment?
I don't know if, Janet, this is Bob here, Del Vecchio. I don't know if Ted Keon has weighed in on this at all, and I think the beach to the east, I know, is scouring badly, especially when there's a major storm. So I don't know if that removing the revetment. This is what I was thinking. Removing the revetment would help that beach. But Thad seems to disagree with that statement. So I don't know if Ted has weighed in or not.
I saw there was a reference in the narrative to having consulted him at least briefly about it, and it's not as expected. It's not there's no clear answer to whether removing it will do more harm or good. Mr. Wieshauer from Woods Hole Group, I'm just looking and noticing that you have a raised hand symbol in the box. Just to let you know, we will be getting to you in a few moments after the commissioners have had a chance to ask their questions. You'll have a chance to speak as well. And just by happenstance that I happen to notice that, because we don't normally monitor the chat box, or we don't use the raise hand function. So I just happened to notice it. So hang in there, we'll get to you.
To the chair, I forwarded the application to Ted Keon. If the commission wants a formal comment letter from him, you're more than willing to ask or put in that request, and I'll forward that along to him.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Other questions?
May I just ask
Yeah, go ahead. You go.
I just feel like I thought Bob Rawls was asking about the culvert and whether or not the culvert would be in danger of collapsing. And Thad's response to that was, well, we're putting down a steel plate, which I think is definitely a common practice. I guess the question that I think maybe I have as a follow-up to that is, there's no quantitative evidence that the steel plate over the culvert will sustain the weight of the materials that are out there that need to be demolished. So I think if, to the commission, if you're comfortable with the culvert having a steel plate over top of it, then do you also, the follow-up question is, do you want some sort of, from a professional, some sort of guarantee that a steel plate in that particular location will be enough to sustain the weight of the material that needs to be carried over it? That just seems like a logical sort of request, but I don't make those requests.
I think a guarantee would be great, but I don't think anyone will give us that. But I think we certainly want to get an engineering assessment of the current condition of the culvert, given and arrive at a quantification, as Callie said, of what's the maximum weight load that it can hold. We just need to have understanding about what that weight is to be, considering the amount of material that's going to be trucked in and out of the site and going over that culvert, over the steel plate. We would also, of course, expect to build into the order of conditions requirements that if the culvert is damaged in any way during the construction, that it would be repaired or replaced in kind to what is existing there. So that's on the other end of things, but I think it's important at the outset to understand better what that roadway and what that culvert can handle and what it can't handle. Considering also we've had some indications that it's not in great shape, that it tends to be blocked up from time to time, it's old, so we would certainly want an engineer to do an assessment.
And as a follow-up to that, it would be nice if the engineer could tell us what they would recommend in terms of how it should be replaced, if it needed to be replaced. Would it need to be larger, a different kind in some ways? And then of course you get into the impact upon the marsh, which is hard to, I certainly can't predict it.
Right, and I hear Thad's point that any changes to the culvert is very much a double-edged sword for the marsh, and we're not in a position. We would need some expert advice on that. But
if I may, based on the regulations, that culvert is extremely undersized. It should be an open bottom. It should be several times larger in area, thus in volume. It would be beneficial to the salt marsh, but detrimental to the property owners if we were to upgrade it. And where it exists within the road layout, we certainly have the right to, or the applicant has the right to repair it, replace it where it goes over private property, there are no rights that are conveyed with it.
So Thad, do you have all rights that you need to do any work on that culvert from the existing property owner?
When you have the right within a road, you have the right to make reasonable improvements to the infrastructure of that road. Having a drainage structure underneath the culvert, you would have the right to replace that, but only within the road layout.
Right.
That culvert extends further west over private properties that are not controlled by the owner or the buyer.
Madam Chair,
Mm.
Bill Riley again. I think Thad's a great surveyor and engineer, and has a more than passing understanding of relevant real estate law. But I believe that the obligations, if somebody with the right to use the road undertook to do repair work, there would be an obligation to do a complete repair. You couldn't just say, "Oh, no, I'm just going to do this little bit right here." And so that that would be my interpretation of the easement rights.
Right. I think that's probably right.
I'm just not sure if it's, given the current notice of intent, if it's not to do any work on the culvert, it's to preserve the culvert so that it doesn't sustain damage during this project. And so I think, as we can talk about replacing the culvert and maybe, the expansion of it sometime down the road, it's really about preserving what's there now, that it doesn't get further damaged by the impact of this project. And I think an engineering study to show that there is some actual evidence to show that it can sustain the load of the material that's going to be passed over it is a pretty legitimate request.
Absolutely. Our interest here is in the protection of the salt marsh. So the extent to which that's impacted by the capacity of the culvert to continue operating, we're interested in protecting the culvert and making sure that it works properly to protect the salt marsh, and we can't do that unless we have a better understanding of the condition of it. So, okay. I have a couple of simple questions, Thad, on the revised materials. So you sent the updated delineation, and it has the data sheets along with the report, but they're not dated, and there's no name associated or signing on the report. So can you take care of that part?
Sure.
For the record? And my dune question got answered. And would you update the site plan, because the site plan sheet, I guess, is 3.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, we did state the older delineation. We'll update that with the new.
There you go. That's where I was going on that. Okay. So let's shift to the tree inventory. So as I understand it, there are 32 trees identified for removal, 9 within the roadway easement, 13 on the lot, and 10 in the proposed view corridor. As you indicated, it's the commission's practice to hold on allowing or permitting any removal of trees within proposed view corridors until the construction is completed and there's a reassessment of what is absolutely necessary to create a view corridor. And at that point, permission would be sought and granted for any kind of tree removal associated with it. So are the trees, the trees that are slated for removal aside from the view corridor, because we need to leave those for the moment, are they identified on the plan?
They are now. They were circled, but the circle didn't come through very boldly. There are now X's over them. Those are the trees to be removed within conservation jurisdiction have been identified.
Okay, I see them. 1, 2.
Outside of the 100 have not.
Yep. Okay, got them.
And it's also important to note that we framed our mitigation based upon all the trees being removed. So we have 10 trees there that, for the view corridor, that are associated. We wouldn't want to have to plant 10 trees and then plant 10 more after getting permission to remove.
Mm-hmm. Well, when in the sequence of this project, when would you propose to be doing the planting?
When are we going to get a permit?
Well, after that, but the question is,
be
planting before or after the construction of the building?
I mean, I would propose planting during the construction of the building. As soon as they take down the existing house at 144, they need to stabilize that ground, and they should be planting out there right away because they're not doing anything else out there. Getting those plants established is important. The view corridor is going to have to come afterwards because we're going to have to wait for something to be built on the building. And then the canopy restoration, they're going to want to get out there and get that work done so that any cleanup that needs to be done can be done before the house is. So I would say right in line with the construction of the building.
Okay, well, I think that's actually, that's feasible, that we can sort out what's coming out for the view corridor. Maybe we don't have to wait for complete construction, but once we can get that clarified earlier in the process.
Probably once the framing is up and we can see out the windows.
Yeah.
It would be feasible.
That would do it.
There might not be windows, but there'll be holes.
Okay, it's a better view. You don't have to worry about the dirt on the windows. Okay, so we'll finalize that during the course of construction. So but I understand you to say that the mitigation is intended to compensate for the total of 32 trees, not just the 22 that are coming out in the construction area, but also the 10. It's not, but they're not identified as, so that's tree for tree, right? So there's 32 canopy trees proposed for removal. And what precisely is the compensation for those trees?
Part of that compensation is out on the coastal bank. It's a pretty exposed area. So we do have cedar trees, a little bit smaller than your canopy trees. We do have some oaks going in behind them and some shad bushes in between. We're really looking for survivability out there. Those are going to be exposed to salt spray. The canopy restoration, those are all oaks and tupelos with the idea that there's an area that's been cut over the years that should be restored, or it's a prime opportunity too.
Do we have any information on the cutting, when it occurred and why?
To be honest, I've worked on this property. I've actually lived at 130 when I was 10 years old. I never even knew it was here until we droned it. We looked at the 3D data and it was who put this here? So they are older cuttings. Trees were cut in half and allowed to fall over. Branches were cut in half, allowed to fall over, and they're growing back. It was, in all honesty, it was impressive. Whoever did it, it was very concealed. You can't really tell from the aerial photos unless you know exactly what you're looking for, and it's a part of the property that few will walk to.
How do you get there? Is it possible even to get there?
It is possible to get there. Once you're in it, there is a lot of undergrowth, a lot of shrubs, so getting through it is a little trickier, but there are some trees that you can see just a couple of steps away from the proposed construction.
Yeah, okay. I appreciate that. I was turned back no matter which direction I tried to go when I was visiting there. Could not get through. Although shorts and flip-flops were not the best idea.
Oh, no. Boots and jeans, highly recommended.
No, I'm not going out there without a lot of field gear on. That's it. Okay. Other questions from other people while I consult my notes here? Commissioners?
This is This is Joe. Thad, are the trees marked? The trees that you want to take down, are they clearly marked that we can see them when we get out there?
Yes, there's red flagging on the trees within jurisdiction to come out. The trees outside of the 100 we didn't mark.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I had a question.
Yes, Tom, go ahead.
I was wondering if Tad was willing to share the drone video with us, since obviously it's going to be a lot clearer and might give us some idea of what the layout of things are, so we're not playing Amazon Explorer.
So do you see it on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, and let me get this guy open. So this is a surface model. We get funny areas. If there was no wind and the trees didn't move, we would get a better representation of all the trees. Looking in here, we can see a clear swath that's been taken out. I hope that's coming through okay.
Well, I'm watching on the television, so it's not quite as digitally enhanced as it should be.
Okay.
So Thad, where your cursor is now almost, yeah, is where the corridor or the cutting happened.
And then where was the house to be located? I had trouble identifying that area when I was out there the other day.
Sure. So let me see about brightening that up a little bit. I don't know if you can see, there's the house right there.
Yes, I can see it.
And then that tree corridor is here, the view corridor.
And Thad, where's the canopy restoration area?
Right through here. Let me try this.
Ah.
So this is, the reds are taller, the blues are lower, and the greens and yellows are in between. And you can really see.
Look at that. Yeah.
Somebody did a number on it out here.
Huh, okay.
And then the proposed building, let me see what color. I mean, there's the proposed building with the lawn. And we are still in Z. So, I mean, we're a good 60 feet away from that with a proposed lawn.
Yep.
Well, a question that is whether the proposed mitigation is going to be in that cleared area.
Yes, yes, it will be. That's to restore the canopy where we have clear canopy to the west, clear canopy to the east, and a void in between.
Right.
And that's where you have 14 trees proposed?
Yes.
Yep, okay.
And unfortunately, we don't want to get machinery out there. We'd have to clear too much. So we want to get the largest trees that we can dig in by hand.
How are you going to get access to do that?
I mean, they will have to get paths and push their way through. If there's some minor trimming to get out there, that may happen, but we would keep it very minimal. But otherwise, it's just getting a wheelbarrow out there with, again, the largest tree possible and get it in the ground.
Okay. Okay, other questions? Other commissioners?
What would he do to cause the trees to be supported in terms of water? And
yeah, they would have to run some hoses out there just to make sure that they get established. These are low enough that it won't take long for the roots to get down to the water table.
Okay. All right. Callie, do you have anything else for the moment?
I have, I'm still gonna pioneer the engineering assessment for that
I'm with you on that. We're gonna, I think that's a given. We're gonna be requiring that.
I think an on-site would be useful, as you mentioned.
Yep.
I just, I think Thad does really fantastic work, as do all of our representatives that come before the commission. I just think that a land management plan for a project that involves such vegetation removal and transition from large canopy trees to shrubs and relocation of vegetation really deserves more of a land management plan, not an actual site plan, but an actual comprehensive description of how the land will be managed in our resource area. As Thad has said, most of the development is outside the 100-foot buffer as far as actual buildings go. But I think the commission has the task of really ensuring that the work that's done out there for the vegetation removal be planned appropriately for that resource area. And usually the commission does that through a land management plan by a certified professional, whether it be someone who has extensive experience as a landscape architect or a restoration ecologist, or someone who is an arborist. So there's a lot of different professions that I think have the ability to do this sort of work. I just think it should be submitted for this project.
I agree, given the scope and the extent and the nature of the work on the landscape in general on this project, and what's going to need to be done in terms of sequencing, scheduling, preparation, monitoring, all of those things would be encompassed in a land management plan for this. And I think that it would behoove the homeowners to have that in place as well, so they understand what's happening across different portions of the property at any time. Yep. All right, if there are any other questions, or I'm going to open it to representative of the homeowners. Mr. Reed.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning. Yep.
Yeah, good morning. Members of the commission, Attorney David Reed from South Yarmouth. I'm representing 9 of the households on Chat Harbor Road. For your record, E.J. McKenna Hive and Lewis Hive of number 25 Chat Harbor. Meredith Beaton Starr and William Starr of number 74. Dorothy and Earl Beaton of number 76. John Curtin of number 18 Chat Harbor. Thomas and Meredith Dahms of number 48 and 60 Chat Harbor. Barb Knowlton and Steve Wardell of number 28 Chat Harbor. Lorraine Lieb and Rosemarie Natali of number 45 Chat Harbor. Franz and Mary Jane Kramer of number 37, and Deborah and Timothy Charlebois of number 9 Chat Harbor. And my apologies to everyone whose names I've just mispronounced. We very much appreciate your review to date. We appreciate that you've taken this matter very seriously, and clearly you have all identified the same issues that we identified and had concerns about, and I'm grateful that you're on the right track to address all of them. With respect to the culvert, I agree with the applicants that it's not on their property. But frankly, I don't see that as an impediment at all to your dealing with it as a necessary component of your order of conditions. To the extent that it does have a direct bearing upon the health of the marsh, and to the extent that it is the applicant's extraordinary traffic for the demolition removal and for the new construction on a very minor road, which at that end is no more than a dirt driveway. That extraordinary traffic is what places the culvert at risk, not the general passing and traffic of the neighborhood. but there's particular and specific traffic. To that extent that which is being asked of you to approve is posing the risk to the culvert, and the risk to the culvert poses a threat to the marsh, it is entirely within your jurisdiction to craft your order of conditions to protect that culvert and to provide for it in advance as well as in the event of some catastrophe to it during the process. If the applicant, because the culvert straddles several parcels of property, if the applicant before you does not have all the authority they need, and I'm not saying they don't, but if they feel they don't, then I suggest it's incumbent upon them to get that authority in order to be able to satisfy your conditions and not the other way around. So I would encourage you to get whatever additional information you feel is appropriate in order to protect the culvert, to craft your conditions to do so, and the implementation of that to the extent that it's legally necessary from other parties is a burden for the applicants to bear, not you. With respect to the correspondence from my clients, I know you've received extensive letters and emails. I appreciate that all of those are to be reflected in your record. I would like to direct your attention, if you, I presume you already have, but to the two letters, one from E.J. McKenna Hybe and Lewis Hybe dated April 4th, and a second to Tom and Meredith Doms of July 3rd, because those two contain extensive narratives as well as photographic evidence of the progression or digression of the quality of the land in this area, particularly the beach, the dune, the marsh itself, and the perimeter trees around the marsh that have degraded over the years. The prospect of additional 32 trees being removed within the buffer is of great concern to my clients. They don't know what effect that's going to have upon the marsh itself, but clearly the removal of very substantial and mature broadleaf trees in most cases, we're not talking about scrub pines out there. There's some very extensive trees that are in harm's way for the development itself outside of the 100-foot buffer, but more importantly to your jurisdiction within the 100-foot buffer zone. And we would urge at your on-site, which again, we feel will be very helpful for you. I've been out there and just seeing things on the ground is much different than seeing them on a plan. And I would encourage you to spend as much time as you need to educate yourselves, to put everything in perspective before you make a decision. That being said, unless you have any questions, actually, I'm sorry, on the photographs, I wanted just to clarify on E.J. McKenna Hybe and Lewis Hybe's letter, the first of their photographs, I don't know if you have them in front of you, if we can see the ones that I have.
Yes.
But the
David,
first is the
1 second, I can put it up.
Okay, is a perspective from their rear deck, and their property includes the northerly portion of the marsh. The houses on the south side of Chat Harbor extend into the marsh themselves. So this is not just an academic concern. The marsh is part of their property. So what happens on one side of the marsh also happens on their side. That one that you have there is a little bit more of a natural, if you will, perspective. It's not, I don't believe, enlarged or zoomed in any way. The other one is. The Dom's letter of July 3rd also provides you with some historical aerial photography, which I think dramatically shows the recession of the coastline, the loss of beach and dune, the invasion of the dune into the marsh now, as well as the lack of trees, or the reduction in trees around the perimeter of the marsh already through natural occurrences. And I'm not suggesting anyone out and cut them down. But with that, what I would like to do with your permission, Madam Chair, is to turn it over to Dr. Wisher from the Woods Hole Group. The neighbors were concerned enough to hire his company's services to evaluate the original proposal. He has not provided you yet with a written report of the supplemental materials, but I believe he has reviewed them and commented upon them, as well as on Dr. Harper's recommendations. So if I could turn it over to Lee Wisher, that would be appreciated, and I'd ask him to speak on behalf of the neighborhood group.
Yes, that's fine. Dr. Wisher, hello.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Lee Wisher. I'm from the Woods Hole Group. I'm here to represent the Chat Harbor Homeowners Group. I'd like to begin by thanking Madam Chairman and the members of the Commission for allowing me to speak today. As you know, the project before you consists of demolishing a house and rebuilding it on the property. And while moving the house landward has a lot of merit, the location also provides potential to damage the adjacent wetland resources, which I will address in my comments. I provided the commission a detailed report May 1st, which I think the commission has. And I've had the opportunity to review the applicant's revised filings and Ms. Harper's comments to the commission. I know you have a full agenda and the meeting's been dragging on, so I'll try and be brief in my comments. The first area of concern is demolition of the existing house. The plan calls for the demolition of the house and removal of debris from the site by truck. The revised plan addressed many of my concerns about tree removal and proposed planting on the slope near and around the house that was demolished, will be demolished. In a report to the commission, Ms. Harper had recommended a tree inventory. I hope the commission would require this and hope it would be completed by an appropriate professional. The demolition of the house will also require a variance from the commission. I believe this allows the commission rather broad latitude in imposing special conditions on the property. The existing house sits immediately behind a seawall that has been inhibiting sediment transport to the adjacent barrier beach for around 39 years. And I want to make it very plain, I'm not advocating removal of the seawall. While I disagree with some of the applicant's arguments about the reasons for not removing the seawall, the removal of the seawall has potential to threaten the neighbor's property and generally destabilize the shoreline as the shoreline attempts to readjust to its new configuration. And I believe that the readjustment would have profound impact, especially on the access road, which I'll address later, which is potentially an access way for beach nourishment. As I said, the seawall created a lack of sediment to the barrier beach, and as a result, this barrier beach is lowered in elevation. This has resulted in more frequent overwashing, and as I said, this sequence is exacerbated by the lack of sediment supply and created by the seawall. And this condition is only going to get worse and continue to worsen as the beach continues to lower in elevation as it gets overwashed. And of course, as sea level continues to rise, as it has been for the last decade or so. Therefore, I would suggest the commission consider requiring periodic beach nourishment to the barrier beach to help maintain the barrier and to help protect the marsh. Additionally, the beach nourishment will be required to maintain the end of the revetment that is presently being flanked. If you go out and you walk the revetment, you'll see that it is eroding. Erosion is occurring behind the terminus. And if this continues, the integrity of the seawall will be compromised. So beach nourishment would be advantageous to the applicant as well as for the barrier beach. I would also like to point out the applicant has requested to maintain the existing road by the house that's going to be removed to access the barrier beach for beach nourishment purposes, as stated in the filing, and therefore requiring beach nourishment should not create an access problem for the applicant. The project site is accessed by the single lane road with a culvert that supplies daily tidal waters to the salt marsh, and there has been some discussion about that. The heavy equipment and loaded dump trucks can potentially damage the road and, more importantly, damage the culvert. And as we've discussed before, the culvert is critically important to the marsh as it's the only opening that provides nutrients to the salt marsh, fish access, and the sole means for draining the marsh when the barrier beach is overtopped and the marsh is flooded during storms. And some of the flooding events were provided to you by some of the homeowners in photographs that they submitted. And I'd like to emphasize the two last functions that the culvert facilitates. Fish access allows fish to enter the marsh, and they eat mosquito larvae, which helps control the mosquito population coming from this marsh, which is a big concern, especially in the South Shore of Chatham. The second function is that the barrier beach is frequently being overtopped, resulting in frequent flooding of the salt marsh. If the culvert is damaged, the floodwaters will be trapped on the marsh, and depending upon the severity of the damage of the culvert, it will either degrade or drown the marsh in the future. So moving the heavy equipment and the loaded dump trucks over the road and underlying culvert has a potential to damage it. And as I said, this could have negative impacts to the health of the marsh. Now, the applicant has stated the road will be matted with a steel plate. However, the culvert is old and made of clay, and it's vulnerable to damage. Therefore, I'd recommend the commission require a survey by a registered professional engineer of the road and the culvert before and after the project is completed. I would also recommend that the survey include a video of the clay culvert both before and after to ensure that the top of the culvert has not been damaged or cracked due to the construction activities. This will help ensure that the culvert does not fail as a result of the demolition activities. The inspection report will also help shield the applicant and the engineer from future liability if the culvert should fail at some future date. Additionally, I would recommend the survey report of the inspections be provided to the commission. And if the culvert is damaged or destroyed, the applicant must replace or restore the culvert to ensure tidal flows into the marsh and drainage from the marsh from storm waters. The second area of concern is the construction of the house itself. The proposed construction of the new house will require tree cutting and clearing of the house site. Additionally, the applicant has requested permission to establish view corridors, which the commission has addressed, and I agree that those should be held in abeyance until the construction is complete enough to assess the need and location of those view corridors. I would recommend the commission carefully consider the limit of the amount of tree cutting permitted. In my estimation, it's somewhat excessive. And replacing mature trees with shrubs does not replicate the habitat or diversity that presently exists on the property. And I know that with the new plan submission, there has been some additional trees that are also being proposed along with the shrubs to be planted. Ms. Harper, in her letter to the commission, recommended a land management plan, which had been discussed. I would certainly support that and recommend the commission adopt that. If the commission agrees to this suggestion, the abutters, the applicant has suggested that this could be incorporated as a condition in the order of conditions. I would point out, however, if the commission agrees to this suggestion, then the abutters would not have a chance to review or comment on the management plan. And I would request that the plan be submitted prior to the commission closing the hearing and issuing an order of condition. The applicant has also requested to be allowed to cut trees, or discuss that, sorry, the view corridor. I would suggest the commission limit the lawn area. The applicant has stated that they would use conservation seed mix as opposed to sod. I would recommend that this be conditioned in the order of conditions if the project is approved. I would also recommend that the commission stipulate in the order of conditions the following: that no sod be permitted, specify that grasses planted should be native fescues and other native species. Conservation mix seems like an acceptable alternative. No fertilizer or pesticides should be permitted, and all structures will be built on the lot to have gutters that drain into dry wells. And I know the applicant has stated that many of these recommendations will be followed, but it's my opinion that it would be beneficial to include these in the order of conditions so that there's a clear understanding of what would be required by the commission. We've already talked about the inventory of the vegetation was unsigned, undated, and was not on letterhead, and it was unclear who actually performed that inventory. And so we have no idea who conducted the assessment, nor the credentials of the person that performed that assessment. Presently, I think the last thing I'd like to say is there's no defined buffer strip per se. The applicant stated that the trees and shrubs that will be planted will take the place of the vegetative buffer strip. And as the commission well knows, that one of the purposes of the buffer strip is to limit runoff and to intercept runoff before it reaches the wetland. The proposed plantings do not constitute a continuous vegetative buffer strip between the proposed development and the wetland. I would recommend that the commission consider the following: to require a vegetative buffer between the development and the salt marsh, limit the tree cutting on the lot as best as possible, and require a detailed planting plan that specifies the location, species, composition, and density of the vegetative buffer that will extend around the property to protect us and control runoff and protect the salt marsh. That concludes my comments, and if the commission has any specific questions for me, I'd be happy to address them.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate all of that very much.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. David Reed again. I just had one additional question at the end, and I appreciate the presentation that was just made. I don't think it's been mentioned yet whether the applicant has yet applied for the necessary zoning relief for the demolition of the house or for the construction of the new. Can we inquire of the applicant whether that has been done yet?
You may indeed.
Madam Chairman, Bill Litchfield, if I could respond.
Yes, Mr. Litchfield.
Intentionally, we have not done so. As notwithstanding the normal course of events, as you are aware, this was originally filed back in March, an interesting time for permitting matters. Because of the Zoning Board of Appeals 65-day requirement, and because of the anticipated extension before you would be able to address this matter, we have intentionally not filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals. As you are also aware, the ZBA ordinarily prefers a comment from you. Even had we filed in June, it would probably be on the ZBA agenda prior to your ability to comment. So it was respect for the process that caused us not to file with the ZBA.
Okay. Do you anticipate filing?
I can file today or tomorrow. I have simply not done so because, again, you're going to have an on-site, as you correctly stated, Madam Chair. This may require several hearings, so it'll probably be on the ZBA agenda in September.
Okay. That's fine. Other questions from other commissioners in the presentation? Well, I thank you again for that. That was comprehensive and like the report, helpful in focusing us on the issues that you correctly point out are at play here. With that, I think we have covered, I've covered everything on my list that I think is appropriate for this opening hearing. I have a number of other items that I think are better left to after we conduct the on-site, some follow-ups. But let me throw it out open to other commissioners before we close this today and schedule the on-site. Anybody have anything else for anybody who's made a presentation today?
Bob Rawls, I have one, and that is if the culvert were to be replaced, would it be worth considering making it larger, or should it remain the same as it is now in terms of the volume? Because it really, I think it's a 10-inch pipe. It's not much volume for a very large marsh. So I'm just wondering what the impact would be. Would there be an advantage if it needed to be replaced for it to be larger or reconfigured in some way? I know that the applicant has talked about the disadvantages of it, but there are probably pros and cons.
At Eldridge here, it would be better for the salt marsh if more water got in and out.
Right.
Okay.
That's right, and at the same time, that may pose a risk for the homes that border the marsh.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes.
Bill Litchfield, just briefly on the culvert. We obviously read Dr. Wisher's comments early on, and Thad responded to them to them in part. We recognize that it is an important issue. We also recognize that we might find ourselves in a situation not unlike that which your colleagues in Wellfleet are dealing with in terms of a salt marsh there. It's a much broader issue. We will address it. As Mr. Riley said, there are some technicalities, and as Mr. Reed said, we will address ownership and rights and so forth. We understand that it is important. Similarly, the other aspects which were requested, we will provide if not by your site visit in due course and in the near future. And we thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Litchfield. So this is the 22nd of July. I would expect that we will get the on-site scheduled in the next couple of weeks. Given the work that needs to be done and the task items that need to be addressed, my suggestion would be to continue this to the August 26th hearing date. Callie will be unavailable on the August 12th and 19th dates. And given what I know about where she's going to be at that time, she won't, even if I could persuade her to call in, it's not possible. So my suggestion is to go with the August 26th date.
I think, Janet, regardless of sort of my schedule, I think
I need you here.
I think the commission has asked for, and feel free to correct me.
Go through the list.
It's a land management plan, the assessment from an engineer about the culvert. I think that as far as the revetment goes, I think if the commission wants to ask for additional information about, it's hard for me to tell, because personally I do agree that with others that I think by removing the revetment, it would destabilize the bank there. But at the same time, I'm not entirely clear if the right to have a revetment still exists if there's no physical structure there. That's something that I need to either get clarity on, and if the commission wants clarity on it, then feel free to request that.
Yep, we can do that, handle that internally, yep.
So, so the land management plan, the engineering assessment on the culvert, the update for the new delineation is what I have. Yep. The 32 trees for removal. It's still hard for me to see the X's on the plan. I don't know about everybody else, but also the tree inventory, to echo what what representative from Woods Hole Group mentioned. It needs to be on letterhead. We don't know who did it. All of that needs to be solidified, I would imagine, in a land management plan. That's all I have for this point. I don't know if I'm missing anything.
No, I'm just checking.
Callie, a formal response from Ted Keon as well, I believe.
Yeah, that's us. Yeah, we will pursue guidance from town council on any legal obligation to remove the revetment. We'll pursue the letter from Ted Keon. We may also, Callie, reach out to perhaps to Greg Berman on some advice as to the impacts of removing the revetment. I'd also like some guidance on, it's been suggested to, I take it that we know that the order of conditions for the construction of the revetment never required any nourishment. It's been suggested that nourishment should be required as a means of protecting the salt marsh. I'd like some further guidance on that internally as well.
I mean, typically the commission, if, I pulled the old permit for the revetment and didn't see any nourishment volumes in there. So if, it's been, the need for nourishment has been discussed a lot, except no one has mentioned volume. It's not in the original permit for the revetment. Are you keeping the access road open for the town to do nourishment? I mean, more clarification on nourishment in general, I think, is also useful.
Right, while we're pursuing that, I think that the applicant needs to pursue it as well. There's been indications that there might be a plan afoot for nourishment, but no commitment to it. So more and I take it that there's a willingness to do nourishment if and when the town re-engages in dredging in the area. but it's still a little unclear and a little squishy. Anything else? That's what I have.
That's it for me now. And I'll go ahead and set up the on-site. Do you want to have those materials in hand before you have the on-site, or do you want to try to schedule the on-site as quickly as possible?
I'd rather get the on-site underway.
Okay.
Yep.
So
and
just
if materials come in before, that's great. If they come in after, we will still have them in advance of the next hearing.
Okay, and just for everybody on the phone, since I know we have some new folks, I poll the commission for times through an online scheduling program. And then once I have discrete times that I can propose, I'll send that to the representatives.
Okay. Then with that, is there a motion to continue this hearing to August 26th?
Bob Rawls, motion to move to the August 26th meeting for further review.
Okay.
Joe Vecchio, second.
All right, roll call to continue the hearing to August 26th. Commissioner Kitts.
Aye.
Rawls.
Aye.
Del Vecchio.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are continued to August the 26th.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Interest and efforts here to moving this along to reach the best possible outcome.
Okay, do you want to keep moving forward?
Yeah, we got one more and then the COC. So
we have the three little beaches.
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
Yeah, and get updated on what's going on there.
Do you want me to read all three of them at once?
No, let's just start with 46 because I have a feeling that this is going to be treated differently.
Okay. 46 Little Beach Road, Crimson Peak LLC is the owner, Morris Island Nominee Trust is the applicant. SE 10-3420, proposed demolition of existing dwelling and septic system, construction of new dwelling, meeting FEMA NFIP standards, installation of new septic system at 46 Little Beach Road, Assessors Map 16A, Parcel H44.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Bill Riley on behalf of Crimson Peak LLC. Regarding 46, as you may be aware, we were at the Zoning Board of Appeals at their last meeting regarding 46, and it was approved. We believe that unless the commission has additional questions, this matter is ready to go to a work session.
So our question to you was, given, assuming that we're going to have a continuance on 47 and 53 until the whatever redesign occurs, you're okay with moving forward on 46 by itself?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. So, yep,
Matt is on the line as well.
Yep. So, yes, we did receive all the revised materials, and I personally should apologize for putting you guys on the spot at the last hearing because I forgot that the agreement was that we were just going to have a conversation at the work session and then bring it forward today before I started firing questions at y'all. But we did get all the information and the responses, and I agree that under the revised materials, the alternatives analysis is now much more comprehensive and robust and lays out the case clearly. Makes the case of the lack of any reasonable alternative to building the house in the location where it's proposed. And the mitigation is, in my view, acceptable to compensate for that. I have a couple of quick questions, Thad, just to circle back on the coverage calculations. Right.
Sure.
Up an old dog here, but I just noticed that in the conservation areas tables, no, on the conservation areas in the property, the mitigation areas are listed as negative. Am I looking at the right one? Mitigation, oh yeah. I thought I highlighted this.
Yes, because we're taking away structures and hardscaping from within the 50.
So 780 to 0 is a net change of 7. So where does that, why is there a negative 1560 for mitigation? Is that a positive 1560 or?
Where is?
On the conservation area table in the 0 to 50. Existing structures are 780, proposed is 0 because it's coming out. So the net change there is a negative 780. And mitigation is listed as negative 1,560 square feet.
Are you on 46?
Yep. Oh, no, hold on, I pulled up the wrong thing. Oh my God. I'm looking at the other one. I'm looking at Chat Harbor. Hang on, let me get the right, here it is, 46, okay. Now, pull it up. But I have the same question about it, that some in places the mitigation is listed as a negative number.
Because we're taking area away from, we're taking 120 square feet of structure out of the 50 foot,
right?
270 square feet of hardscaping.
Yeah.
Then we have the negative numbers in there. Technically, the required mitigation would be in sum total 480 square feet.
Right. I guess it's just a semantics thing, I guess, when I think about why a negative number would be in mitigation. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Quick question for you, just to clarify for my own benefit, the difference when in your conservation area tables between vegetated and landscaped areas.
Vegetated being naturalized, and granted, sometimes naturalized includes invasive, but it's the unmanicured areas. The landscape is something that's manicured, be it lawn or garden.
Okay, gotcha. I meant to make sure.
Yeah, and then those are also colorized differently. The lawn garden area is a lighter green in the post conditions plan, and then the naturalized area is a darker green.
Right, and your table is showing an increase in impervious hardscape. What's that? What's that associated with?
Which one is the increase in impervious hardscape? We're showing a minus 120 within the 0 to 50 and a minus 30 within the 50 to 100.
That's the net change, impervious, 470 to 350. Oh, okay, that is negative 120. Never mind, that's a negative number. Sorry about that, that's all I had. Does anybody else have questions on the revised materials? Hearing none. I guess we should take this to the August 5th work session for an order of conditions. Do I have a motion for that?
Ms. Bobrow's moved to the August 5th work session for OCs.
Delvecchio, second.
Thank you. Roll call to continue to the August 5th work session. Commissioner Kitts.
Aye.
Rawls.
Aye.
Delvecchio.
Aye.
Clark. Tom, are you there?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I vote aye, so this will be continued to the August 5th work session. All right,
Madam
thank you very much.
Regarding the next two matters,
Yeah, what do you want to do?
we'd like to continue them to the second meeting in August, please.
In August?
Right. Or the first meeting in September, whatever's best for you.
Yeah, probably September 2nd hearing. Is that my calendar is a little unclear. Callie, do we have a hearing on September the 2nd?
I'm just checking here. We have, that's a work session, so.
Oh, right.
It should be the 9th is the first hearing.
Okay. How's the 9th work for you?
That'll be fine. We have some redesign work to do, so.
Yeah, heard that. Okay, Callie, do we need to read these then and move to continue them to September 9th?
That's correct.
Go ahead and read it then, please.
47 Little Beach Road, Crimson Peak LLC is the owner, Morris Island Nominee Trust is the applicant, SE 10-3421, proposed demolition of existing dwelling and septic system, construction of new dwelling, meeting FEMA and FIP standards, installation of new septic system at 47 Little Beach Road, Assessors Map 16A, Parcel H50. So there is a request to continue to September 9th.
Motion to move to September 9th for said
Thank
project.
you.
Vecchio, second.
Thank you. Roll call vote to continue to September 9th. Mr. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Delvecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
I vote aye. Continue to September 9th.
Okay, next item on the agenda is 53 Little Beach Road, Crimson Peak LLC is the owner, Morris Island Nominee Trust is the applicant, SE 10-3419, proposed demolition of existing dwelling and septic system, construction of new dwelling meeting FEMA and FIP standards, installation of new septic system at 53 Little Beach Road, Assessors Map 16A, Parcel 50 H52.
Motion to move to September 9th for sessions.
Second, Vecchio.
Thank you. Roll call vote to continue to September 9th. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Delvecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
I vote aye. Continue to September 9th. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, certificates of compliance. 784 Orleans Road, Riders Cove, Town Landing, Town of Chatham, SC 10-2376. Certificate of compliance requested for the installation of 2 steel pile supported seasonal floats and maintenance dredging within a licensed dredge area in Riders Cove at Town Landing. Just flipping through my pages here. I recommend complete certification with ongoing conditions B6 and B8.
Questions or comments? Motion to approve certificate of compliance?
Bob Rawls, motion to approve COC.
Vecchio, second.
Thank you. Roll call vote to approve the COC. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Delvecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
I vote aye. Approved.
Okay, the next one on the agenda is 9 Chat Harbor Lane, Cockle Cove Trust, Mark Ferry is trustee, SC 10-2052. Certificate of compliance requested for demolition of an existing single-family dwelling, construction of a new single-family dwelling, associated hardscaping and landscaping improvements. The order of conditions has lapsed and is no longer valid, and the work regulated by it was never started. This is a box that you can check on the certificate of compliance request. And so the engineer, which David Clark has checked that box. And so basically no work has started and the COC can be released.
Questions or comments? Okay, motion to approve the certificate?
Bob Rawls, motion to approve, even though it was not done.
Right. Well, it will say it wasn't done and it lapsed, so they do provide for that.
Vecchio, second.
Thank you. Roll call vote to approve the certificate. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Delvecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
I vote aye. That one's approved too.
Okay, 444 Cockle Cove Road, Richard Dunn, Gail Peterson, and Nancy Dunn, SC 10-846. Certificate of compliance requested for construction of an addition to an existing single-family dwelling This is a rather old order of conditions.
Wow, 846. Wow. That's the oldest one I've seen.
I recommend complete certification with no ongoing conditions.
Okay. When was this? When does 846 go back to?
846 goes back, to look it up here quick.
I just, it must be like the 80s or something.
1990.
1990, yeah. All right, motion to approve?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Tom.
with these after the fact old COCs that we occasionally get, is there any evidence, and I mean that in a literal sense, that the work was in fact completed? I mean, we have a rough statement, but I'm thinking of it evidentially.
Yeah, sure. Callie does an inspection each time.
Oh, she does. Okay.
Yep, and looks at it to make sure that everything was done in accordance with the order of conditions. And if it's not, she notes it, and then we have some issues and problems to deal with.
Yeah, I visit all the sites. Technically, though, under the Wetlands Protection Act, it states that the agent and the representative making the request for the COC should visit the site together. And I wish we would return to that practice, because it's required, but it's also, I think, a better practice. But yeah, I visited the site for all of these. For the ones that are like from the 90s, where the orders of conditions don't even have a project description, it becomes a little bit more complicated. But in this particular case, for 444 Cockle Cove Road, Mr. Farber did provide as much evidence as he possibly could to state that the addition was placed on a house in accordance with the order, and then for the septic included some more information on the from the Board of Health, or from the actual health agent, some more evidence about that septic system. So it kind of becomes more of a research project for some of these older ones, but we do try to obviously make sure they're in compliance with the order.
Yeah, some detective work is required for some of these.
Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. All right, motion to approve the certificate for 444 Cockle Cove Road, SC 10846.
Bob Rawls, motion to approve.
Vecchio, second.
Thank you. Roll call vote to approve this one. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Del Vecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. That one's approved.
Okay, the next item is 444 Cockle Cove Road, Richard Dunn, Gail Peterson, and Nancy Dune, SC 101893, certificate of compliance to upgrade the septic system. I also recommend complete certification with no ongoing conditions.
Okay. Motion to approve.
Bob Rawls, motion to approve.
Yep.
Del Vecchio, second.
Thank you. Roll call vote to approve this one, SC 101893. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Del Vecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Unanimously approved.
Okay, 32 Seapine Road, Harold and Louis Schmeck, SC 10932, certificate of compliance requested for construction of an addition to an existing single-family dwelling. Again, this is a relatively old order of conditions. I recommend complete certification with no ongoing conditions.
Okay.
All right, Bob Rawls, motion to approve.
Del Vecchio, second.
Thank you. Roll call vote to approve. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Del Vecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. That one's approved.
Okay, 32 Seapine Road, Harold and Louis Schmeck, SC 102327, certificate of compliance requested for vegetation removal to maintain a view to Crow's Pond. I recommend complete certification with no ongoing conditions, because the ongoing condition to maintain the view corridor was specifically tied to that particular owner of the property and is since being sold. So I recommend no ongoing conditions for this particular order.
And what does that mean, Callie? That then there is no further permit or permission to maintain a view corridor, and the new owner has to apply?
Yep, and it's kind of like what the commission did for 41 Wood Carver, where they tied the frag removal to the property owner. This particular order tied the pruning for a view for that particular property owner. I visited the site a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. I know that there's a notice of intent coming for this project for the new owner. And I know that they will be proposing to maintain that view corridor. So that makes sense.
I like the idea, because that way that each time it's incorporated into a new order of conditions with all of the requirements based on what we know about how they're going to proceed. So that makes sense.
Yep.
All right, motion to approve.
Yeah, Bob Rawls, motion to approve.
Delvecchio, second.
Okay, roll call vote to approve this order of conditions. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Delvecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. That one's approved.
Okay, 159 Sea Pine Road, Diane Lee Denby, SC 103167, certificate of compliance requested for the placement of sand nourishment and construction of a rock revetment. Again, this order of conditions has lapsed and is therefore no longer valid, and the work regulated by it was never started.
And we heard about that earlier today.
Yep.
So,
All right, Bob Rawls, motion to approve this one.
Delvecchio, second.
roll call vote. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Delvecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
I vote aye. That one's approved.
Okay, that's it for the certificates of compliance.
Okay. That's it for my agenda. Is that it for the agenda?
Yes.
Yay.
Bob Rawls, I making a motion to adjourn this hearing.
Delvecchio, second.
All right, roll call vote to adjourn. Commissioner Kitts?
Aye.
Rawls?
Aye.
Delvecchio?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
I vote aye. We're out of here. Hearing adjourned at 11:53 a.m.